What are the next steps? What is the timeline? Patrick Witt, who we recently interviewed, he's targeting July 4th to get this passed in the Senate and then go, having it go to President Trump's desk.
Yeah, what a great date to get this done if that happens.
That would be pretty significant because of the 250-year anniversary of the United States. This episode is brought to you by iTrust Capital. iTrust Capital allows you to invest in crypto as well as precious metals like gold and silver via an IRA. And this gives you huge tax advantages. So you can invest in over 90 crypto assets, including Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, Solana, and many more. You also get access to stablecoins such as Circle's USDC and Ripple's RLUSD. And as it relates to precious metals, you can invest in gold and silver, and these are the physical assets. So you're not investing in paper gold and silver. So on this platform, you can redeem the gold and silver if you choose to, and not many platforms offer that. Now, the big advantage to investing via iTrust Capital's IRA is the huge tax advantages. Many of you know you incur capital gains taxes when you sell at a gain. Well, you can minimize the effect of some of that by doing it via an IRA, especially if you have a long-term view on crypto as well as precious metals. And you can buy and sell crypto and precious metals 24/7. It's low cost and no monthly fee. So this is a great option to get exposure to these two great asset classes. And in addition, they have a great custody solution. It's called Premium Custody Account. So it uses institutional grade crypto custody, such as Coinbase Prime, which BlackRock leverages. iTrust also uses Fidelity Digital Assets as well as Fireblocks, and it's a closed loop system. So if someone hacks into your account, they can't withdraw funds. I believe this is the second safest way to custody your assets, right behind self-custody, where you control the private keys. And within the custody account, you could buy and sell 24/7. It's low fees. So this is a great option for custody of your assets, and you can sleep at night knowing that you're getting the institutional grade custodial services. So once again, two great products here from iTrust Capital, the IRA, where you can roll over your existing 401k or IRA to iTrust Capital's version, getting the huge tax advantages, and the institutional custody. And folks, if you sign up with my link at itrustcapital.com/go/thinkingcrypto, you could get a $100 funding bonus. I have an account with iTrust Capital, so I encourage you to go check out iTrust Capital, learn about their services, and see if it's right for you. Again, you can get a $100 funding bonus by signing up via my link, which is itrustcapital.com/go/thinkingcrypto. Link will be in the description. Hey everyone, welcome into the Thinking Crypto podcast, Crypto Water Cooler series. I'm Tony Edward.
And I'm Amanda Whitcroft.
And we are going to do a deep dive into the latest and greatest crypto news that you need to know about. It was a huge week for the crypto market, historic. Amanda, the Clarity Act passed through the markup phase in the Senate, which is huge.
Yeah, 15-9 bipartisan vote. This is one of the most important developments in crypto in Washington because, I think it's signaling finally the industry is moving closer toward an actual regulatory framework instead of this regulation by enforcement thing,
Absolutely. What a complete 180 from how things were, let's say, 3-4 years ago under Gary Gensler, Elizabeth Warren, and the Biden administration. And look, this is not, I want to make sure it's clear, this is not an anti-Democrat statement. It's a matter of people who are forward-thinking and those who are not. Because Angela Alsobrooks, shout out to Senator Angela Alsobrooks, a Democrat, who got the stablecoin compromise deal done along with Senator Tom Tillis, a Republican. And she was also part of in voting to get this through. So there were Democrats who were trying to get innovation and progress move forward in the United States.
Yeah. And I loved what Senator Alsobrooks said, about how she listened to her daughter or her daughters and, how they are a huge advocate for this to be pushed forward. And she's looking at the youth and the children and what they need to succeed and generate wealth. And I thought that was so articulate. But also, like Elizabeth Warren, shame on you, despite, as you pointed out, despite your politics. Why would you not want that for future generations?
Absolutely. The opportunity to invest in this asset, allowing innovation to flourish in the United States to create jobs for said demographics, right? But also, Amanda, the important thing is to protect, because you need to get all the agencies on the same page. They need to know what their roles are and what the guardrails are, and they need to enforce those guardrails. without the Clarity Act, it's hard to get everybody on the same page.
Yeah. For years, one of the biggest institutional barriers has been uncertainty, as we know. What qualifies as security? What qualifies as a commodity? Who regulates what? And so we all know that traditional finance does not like uncertainty. They don't play it, in that water. And so now that we can work with these rules, this is great. And bipartisan support is really what we needed to move this forward.
Yeah, pretty historic. And everyone wants to know what's going to happen next. It now goes to the full Senate floor to go through the additional process. And, the sausage making process in DC at times can be really ugly, frustrating. But
Yeah.
I mean, we are seeing progress, and that's the important part. We're getting over these respective hurdles. And I think we're probably maybe going to hear by next week from the folks in the Senate what are the next steps? What is the timeline? Patrick Witt, who we recently interviewed, he's targeting July 4th to get this passed in the Senate and then having it go to President Trump's desk.
Yeah. What a great date to get this done if that happens.
That would be pretty significant because of the 250-year anniversary of the United States having this new technology solidified into law and allowing innovation to flourish. That would be pretty amazing.
Yeah. It's, if America overregulates, in my opinion, or delays too long, it's just innovation is going to move offshore. And I know a lot of people have been saying that. Elizabeth Warren continuing to push back shows that there's still is this divide in Washington. But aside from that, you do have to recognize that the U.S. is realizing that stablecoins and tokenization, just crypto infrastructure in general, this is becoming a global financial priority, and I'm happy to see that we are understanding that.
Yeah, and I think a great example of that, Amanda, this is a small microcosm of what's to come because there are big superpowers like China and others who are working on this. But Bermuda is looking to move its on-chain economy plan, payments and financial services on-chain. So they mentioned that they're going to do that on the Stellar blockchain. Amanda, that blows my mind. You have an economy that's going to go on the blockchain. And like I said, this is a microcosm of what's to come.
Yeah, it's important because it shows that smaller jurisdictions are moving faster than just larger governments. Government in general, as we've seen, moves at a snail's pace. But when you're implementing blockchain-based systems, I mean, Bermuda has been crypto friendly for years. That's why, Anthony Scaramucci, SALT, they do the Bermuda Symposium, the conference that they do there. But now the conversation is moving from, like I said, this experimental phase to, okay, they're actually more agile now and they're benefiting from this financial innovation. Um, that's that's great.
Yeah, it's certainly the path forward. I think coming out of Davos, even just the beginning of this year, we saw after that more countries start to embrace blockchain technology. They're starting to put out their own guidelines and rules. And then you have these large associations like the Bank of International Settlements, the IMF, who are now all talking about tokenization and stablecoins. So clearly, everybody is on the same page. Some are moving faster than others, but the end goal is for a lot of the markets and the economies running on blockchain rails, where it's 24/7 instant settlement, cheaper fees for payments and moving money. So there's going to be a lot of benefits to the customers. And then I think a huge benefit is being able to bank the unbanked. So people who did not have access to financial services, maybe in certain countries in South America or Africa, but they have smartphones, right? They can now participate in the economy, in the global economy, so to speak, by having US dollar stable coins where they can earn yield, where they can move money. So you're opening up this whole new world of economic movement and technological advance.
Yeah. And I think it's important too to realize like blockchain doesn't automatically fix it. I think if you're any vacationer who's gone to the Caribbean, Turks and Caicos or the Bahamas and, Bermuda included, that things can get pricey very quickly because they have to import a lot of their goods. But we have to start somewhere because even the fees that they, incur because of how their economy works, if we can at least kind of help to ease a little bit of that stress and that pain through blockchain. It's certainly because that's where it starts with the economy. Is it first starts with the companies, with the corporations, and then it hits your retail consumers. So if we can at least start from that point, I think that would ease a lot of these financial stresses.
Absolutely. So Amanda, you and I are going to have to try to get some representatives from the Bermuda government on to talk about this because it's significant. And I think, again, this is just an example of what's to come. I think every major country, small or big, they're going to do this.
Yeah, it's so ultimately the direction that this industry is headed, and I think it's great.
Yeah, but it goes back to the rules of the road need to be clear. Here in the United States, we are making progress at least. In the EU, they've passed their MiCA regulations, and I think we're going to see other countries follow the United States model once it's finalized, and it'll be off to the races. We're going to see incredible adoption and building, and it's funny. I'll mention there's some folks from the Pakistan government reached out to me because they've been doing a lot with crypto, partnering with Binance, looking to invest and build with blockchain. They want to talk about what they're doing. So we're going to have to, maybe we'll be talking to more countries soon.
Yeah. No, we have to. I think that's how that's how you really that's adoption is global. It has to be global. So I think that's great.
Now, we also saw recently a lot of TradFi institutions. They are launching their crypto services. They're talking about their plans. So everyone now has to have a crypto strategy. So just this week, Charles Schwab, they announced they launched Bitcoin and Ether trading for their clients, and they're officially calling their service Schwab Crypto. So
Yeah.
it's amazing the names that are jumping in. And just last week, Morgan Stanley said E-Trade is going to launch crypto trading later this year. So competition's heating up.
It sure is. TradFi understand like one of the biggest narratives of this cycle is that TradFi stopped kind of fighting crypto and they started monetizing it. So now every major institution, they want clients to have exposure. Charles Schwab, their entire portfolio base has already had exposure through their ETF. So they're understand the stable coins are becoming useful. Blockchain rails can reduce operational costs. So it's this conversation is it's not will crypto survive? It's how can we integrate crypto into these existing financial systems? And so I think Schwab and Morgan Stanley, this is another major escalation in the brokerage wars.
One thing I've been talking about for years is that when TradFi institutions like Schwab and Morgan Stanley come in, the native crypto exchanges and firms better up their game. They better make sure they're providing tier one level support to customers because the TradFi institutions know how to do that. And one of the announcements or one of the details of the announcement with the Morgan Stanley E-Trade crypto trading is that they're saying they're going to go in with lower fees than Coinbase, Robinhood, and even Charles Schwab. So it's going to get really interesting. Now, this is very good for the consumer. Competition is good for the consumer, but the native crypto firms better up their game.
Yeah. Well, this is why you have Coinbase, that and it's always positioning itself as infrastructure and custody and not just as an exchange, because I think at some point consumers may not even distinguish between a crypto platform and a financial platform. And I think not to jump too quickly, but you want to talk about Circle. That's another great company that I think is doing that.
Yeah. So Circle this week announced they raised $222 million in a token presale, valuing their new ARC blockchain at about $3 billion. So, man, this reminded me of 2017, the ICO movement. Now, the
Yeah.
folks who involved were not retail. They were institutional. They were accredited. But at the same time, they launched the blockchain and they did a pre-sale of their token. And I can imagine they're eventually going to open it up to retail, but it's fascinating. It's like ICOs returning again.
Yeah. Well, first of all, look at the investor lineup: BlackRock, Apollo, A16Z. That combination of both Wall Street and crypto native capital is it's pretty interesting. I think that goes along with a lot of the conversations that we've been having. And again, that's making Circle look less like just the stablecoin company, and it's becoming financial infrastructure.
There was a lot of controversy around this news, Amanda, where folks are saying, why does Circle need its own blockchain? Because they're issuing their USDC stablecoin and other chains like Ethereum, Stellar, so on and so forth. But one person brought up on a X space this week where they said, look, if the Fed continues to cut rates, which we anticipate they will, the payout on the interest and yield and all that's going to start to decrease. Circle's not going to have as much revenue. So it's kind of, let's launch our own blockchain, have building a lot of folks come in and build on it, and the token valuation go up. And obviously there's tokenomics there where that's going to benefit their balance sheet. And look, even Coinbase, we interviewed someone from Coinbase recently where they're talking about launching a token on Base. So it seems everyone is trying to bring this model, so to speak, into their business to help grow their network effects and adoption.
Yeah. I think people understand too, similar to the ICO movement, it's now token launches have become an integral part of a company's, whether they're leading up towards an IPO or they're trying to get more exposure through community growth, like Base's chief of what was his title? Yeah, head of growth, Zen. It's a huge play for community and also building the brand of a company.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see once the Clarity Act passes, more institutions, more brands and companies launch their own token and blockchain. Because look, I know some people are right away going to say, "Wait a minute, they just want to raise money." Well, that's part of it, but also if you have your own blockchain, and it enables a lot of utility, and you know you can do a lot of cool things within your own ecosystem without necessarily having to go to someone else's. So for example, I love this example, Amazon, if they were to put their rewards, Amazon Prime and all these things on chain and tokenize it, and it becomes more liquid and it's out in the market, and the holders and the prime participants can benefit by just, let's say, staking or locking up the tokens. That's a win-win for the business as well as the consumers.
Yeah, I agree. And I think and correct me if you disagree or if you, but I would equate it to the NFT bubble, not the artwork, but the utility side of that when everybody wanted to pitch their NFT marketplace for specifically amongst industries like ticketing, where it really, there was an unlock there that provided value. I would say the same goes here for a token. There's a huge value add that people are seeing, and it's working. I mean, there are case studies where this isn't just another capital raise or fund, as you pointed out. This is major for integration of the company infrastructure.
Absolutely. So I can imagine Walmart, Amazon, all these major retailers and brands are going to look to do this because it will just boost customer loyalty and affinity, help keep people around longer. Because if I have a token, let's again on Amazon, and I can stake it and earn rewards, and it gives me benefits and discounts as long as I keep it there, right? If I leave the ecosystem, I don't get it. But if I stay there and I continue to get benefits, I I love it. I love discounts. I love getting free stuff, right? As far
Yeah.
as being able to spend and get more for my money. So I think that will be a win for consumers, and people will gravitate to it.
Yeah, loyalty is half of the game for these companies. The other is just continuing to purchase.
Yeah, for sure. So I think yeah, I've been talking to quite a few folks about this over the years, and once we get that regulation in place, we're going to see the true token economy, airline miles, and all these things tokenized, and that will unlock so much more. Because imagine if you have those tokens from an airline or some brand, and then you can move it into some DeFi protocol and borrow against it as well, right? Uh, just think about the unlock there for the ability to get more capital, more liquidity, just do more with the value.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's where I feel like the verbiage of everything is also going to start changing because it's going to become so second nature for people to unlock these things on their phones or, however accessible they are to us in our wallets or that tokenization and all these buzzwords that have been created because this is all so new. It's just going to become like you're clicking your Facebook or your Twitter app to just open and scroll of the trending news. That's what it's going to be, except, in whichever way you're using it.
Yeah. And imagine getting rewarded for even using social media, right? I think that will kick off some crazy game theory that these platforms will say, and some folks have tried to do this already. What is the name? Farcaster. I think they tried to do
Yeah.
this model, but just
Yep.
imagine if Facebook, Instagram, well, it's same company, but X, uh, they reward you with tokens for your activity. So kind of giving you a bit of the cut. Right now, they monetize your activity and they take the pie, right? But if you get
Yeah.
a slice, that would be really nice. Now, these incentive models always drive bad actors to come in and do crazy
Yeah.
stuff. But
Yeah.
we're talking about the everyday user that I log in, I scroll, and I'm active. Oh, got some tokens. And those tokens are actually worth something. And I can move them off the platform and go, another example, to a Walmart or Amazon and buy something.
Yeah.
Interoperability, that would be a big win, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And you have the platforms are incentivized to do that. And I don't know what exactly, I don't know if it's just scrolling or maybe there's something a bit more, appealing to people where it's like you have to cross these thresholds in order to earn. But whatever it is, I think it's just smart business.
Yeah. And this is the power of the blockchain where they can do that and it's verifiable because it's on the blockchain. No one can just mint a whole bunch of other tokens and wipe your token out and that type of thing. So this is why that can't exist right now in the Web 2 world. It has to be blockchain powered where you have that verifiability, instant settlement, 24/7 access. So it's not, oh, well, you can't do it at midnight because the servers are down or whatever. No, it's there and you can access it anytime.
Yeah, it's wild to think that everything's going to come, markets being 24/7. It's exciting. It's also very there is a bit of fear behind it's just 24/7 access. I don't know, something about that. I'm just like, oof, what's gonna happen with that? But we shall see.
Yeah. I often ask the question to folks, are we going to go drive ourselves crazy? But maybe the saving grace or part of this is that AI agents are coming along, humanoid robots are coming along in parallel to this technology. So those things can help us. We have our AI agent just monitoring our portfolio or doing things while we sleep. So we don't have to necessarily be up 3 a.m. in the morning down in
Yeah.
coffee.
Yeah. I'd love to have somebody on the podcast, in the security sector, because I know that there's a lot of conversation around that and there's a lot of great points coming up, but not a lot of companies actually coming up with solutions towards these things. So would love to hear from some of your legal folks of what they think that looks like.
Yeah. And I think some of it is still TBD. Folks are still trying to figure it out. And on that note, with 24/7 markets, JPMorgan this week announced they're launching a tokenized money market fund, and it's going to be compliant with the Genius Act, and they're building it on the Ethereum blockchain. We see all these major firms are tokenizing, and to the topic that we've been talking about of 24/7 markets, everybody's doing it, right?
Yeah.
Uh, Now, there are probably right ways to do it and wrong ways to do it. And to your point, there's a missing gap of, well, what happens at midnight when we're sleeping or whatever it may be? How does this all pan out? And I think that's still TBD.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. And the irony that Wall Street, Jamie Dimon and his, if you go back to everything that he has said throughout the years on Bitcoin and decentralization and ultimately, JP Morgan may validate blockchain technology, even if they don't embrace this ideology of decentralization. It's just it's funny where we are now.
Yeah. As you just mentioned, if that they don't necessarily embrace the idea of decentralization, in yesterday's markup, there was actually a provision that was removed for DeFi. And
That's right.
Senator Bernie Moreno said, look, we still have to work on this before this thing goes to the full Senate floor for vote. But the institutions, those big institutions like JP Morgan Citadel, they're fighting DeFi. They hate DeFi because they're so used to controlling all the infrastructure and the piping, right? Nothing goes through the economy without us. It must
Yeah.
go. Well, no, DeFi allows you to go without you guys. So
Yeah.
this is going to be a big battle.
No, it sure is. And, Grant Cardone, who we're about to talk to, it's just he came out with a great article in the street talking about Social Security and, the pushback. And I've always had my questions about Social Security, but I remember when George W. Bush floated the idea of, allowing people to invest their own money that they would receive from retirement. to generate wealth. And the pushback from the government, speaking of centralized authorities, was that Americans could not be trusted to invest their own money. They didn't know how to do that wisely, and that was the pushback. And so you have Grant Cardone, which is why I listen to this. He's kind of a rags to riches story of somebody who is really looking out for the American people, which you hear Senator Scott, Democrat or Republican, both, which I like hearing, is you have to care about the innovation of this country and its people. And if you're not doing that and you're just more concerned with control, then you just shouldn't be in a leadership position.
Absolutely. And look, there was a time, Amanda, before all this technology that was the status quo. They had to control it. And I get it, right? There was a time before we all had smartphones and the internet was, everybody was connected to the internet where you had access to information. But the world has changed and we have to change with it. We have to embrace this new technology and think about the future generations. Okay, well, this model that worked for the boomers, it ain't going to fly
Right.
in a AI humanoid world, in a more global economy with more competition than we've ever seen. So we got to start putting our thinking caps on here and figuring out what we're going to do with Social Security. How I have an 8-year old daughter. You have a young baby, right? So we got to think about these things. What is
Yeah.
the future going to look like, and what economic models are going to work?
Yeah, it's almost, this is a modern day revolution, isn't it? When you frame it that way, it's like our founding fathers would be throwing servers into the ocean with where things are. But we have to, exactly. It's a great thing, but of course, there's going to be hiccups along the way.
Yeah, and that's par for the course. I often like to remind people, look, when the tractor came along, do you know how many people were displaced as far as jobs on farms, right? Because majority of people were employed on farms. That's how we got our food and how the economy was driven. But
Yeah,
things had to change, and we entered the industrial revolution. So progress, technology, you can't stop it. These are things that are immovable forces. They will continue to happen because that's just the nature of human beings, civilization, and so forth. So we have to figure out the balance, of course. I'm not saying you just let it run and take over everything and destroy everything, but find a balance. But you can't just be like, oh, whatever,
yeah.
let's ignore that. Who cares? Stop it. No, we live in a global world where other countries are going to take the reins and start moving.
Yeah, I totally agree. And this has been happening too throughout history. You remember when the internet first came around, computers first came around. There was that old movie from the 50s, with Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy, called Desk Set. And it was, computers were going to take away all human jobs. And that's it. The computer came along and humans were gone. So I really appreciate the conversations that are being had. And I'm seeing more and more of them, that AI is not here to replace jobs. Yes, there has to be a rethink, a massive rethink as far as what the workforce will look like. But opportunities only get created and pivot with this new technology. There's no Terminator, you know, apocalyptic future, very dystopian future where humans are walking around like zombies because robots are coming in. This is all fear mongering. So I really appreciate more. In fact, I just saw Crypto in America. They had a guest on where it's finally coming. It's like, no, this is going to empower the workforce.
Yeah, and it's also I'll bring up a name which is very controversial, but not so much about that I support him, but rather what he's thinking about. Elon Musk,
Hmm.
his mission to colonize Mars and do these things with humanoid robots, with AI, it will allow us to go further than we have in the history of human beings and going into space. Um, and to explore and go even into the deepest part of the oceans, right? That things we still don't know about, and it will allow us to do more, is what I'm trying to say. So new jobs, new activities will be created around those movements, right? Think about 100 years from now, moon is already colonized, and we're probably very, I don't know what's happening on Mars, but there's some sort of civilization on Mars. Again, look back into history. It seems almost impossible. Well, the car was almost impossible, right? And
Yeah.
all these things, humanoid robots. Go back 300 years. If you took a time machine, people would think you're crazy. Well, is it crazy to say in 100 years we have colonized some of these other planets to a certain degree? I don't think
Maybe.
so.
Man, how do we went from money markets, blockchain, and now we're colonizing Mars.
Yeah, I think it's a theme of technological advance and
Yeah,
innovation, right? And blockchain, it's so funny, these technologies complement each other. Blockchain is going to help police the humanoid robot and the AI agents, allow them to do commerce. And, these robots and these things will, I think, free us up to do things that we would love to, go fishing, hunting, whatever it may
yeah.
be. Uh, so I think there's going to be benefits. I'm not of the Skynet Terminator mindset.
No. That actually reminds me, and I have to bring this up. I don't know if you're noticing this. A lot of your Bitcoin influencers, like your big Bitcoin maxis, I don't know if they're like pivoting into AI. A lot of like they're starting to integrate the AI conversation with a lot of their Anthony Pompliano, Rachel Wolfson. And some even they're just complementing their conversation with something different. And I noticed that the past couple weeks. And I wonder if there's something to be said there that not Bitcoin is becoming nothing. It's not. It's obviously here to stay, but it's almost becoming boring in a good way. It's becoming boring because it's no longer speculative. It's no longer this. So why such this hard push to prove its price? Everybody like I think asking the price of Bitcoin now is almost kind of a moot point because it does follow the dollar now. It's so a part of balance sheets in your institutions that I don't know. I just noticed that.
Yeah, it's a great point. We to what you're saying, Bitcoin's kind of matured, right?
Yeah.
BlackRock has the largest Bitcoin ETF. So is that the pinnacle, right? Maybe next is governments holding on their balance sheet, but as far as the pinnacle of financing and Wall Street, it's reached it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's like, okay, everybody kind of knows about Bitcoin. They can get access easily now via ETFs and the firms they're familiar with. What else can you say about it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the utility to building is happening more on the blockchain side with different blockchains and what cool applications and financial products can you build on them? And I think that's the exciting part.
Exactly.
Well, I think we covered everything, Amanda. Huge
I
week,
think so.
historic week with the Clarity Act. And hopefully by the next time we are doing this, another water cooler episode, we got a date for when the vote may happen for the
Yes.
Act on the full Senate floor.
Yes. In the meantime, Tony, I know everybody else on X is enjoying your Elizabeth Warren rants. So please continue.
She just annoys me, man, because I know the game and it's like, come on, man. Stop it, Elizabeth. Stop it. Go home.
What were her last words?
It will blow up the
Yes.
economy.
Wait till this blow. It's, I couldn't help myself. I'm like, John Deaton, I think she just made your job a lot easier to take Massachusetts, sir. Please do us all a favor.
And it's funny, right? Because, well, I guess, she's playing the smoke and mirrors because under her regime, so to speak, when she had the financial services seat with Gensler, they didn't do their job. And that's what caused FTX and all these things to collapse because you're the regulator. Go and check on what they're doing. Make sure everything's up to par. They didn't do that. Put out the rulemaking. They didn't do any of that. And now they're saying, oh, if you put the actual regulations in place that will protect consumers, it will blow up the economy. Really?
Blow up and yeah, it's the irony of this woman telling us what will blow up the economy after everything she's done. But also,
Exactly.
you remember the salary that this woman, is like what around 170,000 a year. But of course, all these politicians, they tell you it's the book royalties that they've made their millions with, and that's which I just never ever believe. And I know Elizabeth Warren is married to a very successful, I think he's a Harvard law graduate. I, but it's just she is considered she's a one percenter. She's out of touch, and I'd much rather somebody like Senator Scott who will tell you, I come from nothing. I came from poverty, and here he is bullish on this innovation. And isn't that interesting? It's like the out of touch one percenter wants nothing to do with this technology, but the person who came from nothing and has come into success and is seeing things for how they, for the average American that wants to generate wealth, which is what we should be fighting for and empowering in this country. And they're bullish on it. And it's just, you have to look at those things.
A stark contrast. And they were sitting right next to each other, too.
I loved it.
Well, Amanda, a great week, lots of progress, and I'm looking forward to more progress And hopefully, fingers crossed, this bill makes it out by July 4th. It would be monumentous, and we'll all be celebrating.
Yes, yes, please. Thanks so much, Tony.
Thanks, Amanda. Catch you guys in the next one.